Every year, the NFL draft is the Super Bowl for NFL general managers around the league. Jobs are on the line for the GMs and the head coaches and the rest of their staffs. Some of these teams need this draft a lot more than others because they may get fired if they do not get things right in this draft. We're going to be talking through the teams that need to get it right in this year's draft more than others. We're going to be running through a lot of team needs around the NFL over the next hour. Stay with us. Welcome to a very special edition of the Sharp Football Show. I am joined by my guys, Hribar, Ray Summerlin. We are going to be talking to you guys for the next hour about teams that need to nail it this year in the NFL draft. They've got to get it right. Jobs might be on the line if they mess things up. You know, some coaches are new and they have a little bit longer leash. Some coaches are really old and they've been winning, so they've got a longer leash. But there's a lot of teams that really need to get things right this season. And, you know, these guys, they've been working through the NFL draft team needs for weeks now, trying to identify which teams need which position groups to be filled the most in the NFL draft. You know, you guys have been doing this for a while now, for several years, but how does this year compare to other years in terms of being able to identify those team needs? Rich, you know, what are your thoughts on your process with just a few teams left to write up? How does this year compare to other years?
Well, I think the NFL going to 17 games definitely is a huge impact. Definitely when you look at, because writing up every offensive line, the big common theme is that nobody had an offensive line basically cohesively play together over the course of the season. I mean, there were only 3 teams last year that had their top 5 offensive linemen play 2/3 or more of the snaps. You know, coincidentally, of course, all those teams made the playoffs, the Packers, the Bills, and the Ravens, but that's it. And then, you know, you look at the number of teams that were below 50%, and it was 21 teams. So definitely this addition of 17 games has made, you know, offensive line continuity a big deal. And that has a byproduct of, you know, impacting all the things we care about in terms of offensive production. And it's going to be something that carries over to a lot of the teams that we talk about from the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, I think injury luck is really a good call out, because injury luck's always been important in the NFL. It seems like it's becoming more important as we see more of like the premier positions that maybe we didn't expect previously didn't get hurt as often. We see them go down. And I'm glad you mentioned the offensive line, because as I obviously read through all of what Rich has written, and like it seemed like every single offensive line I was reading, especially as we were earlier in the draft order, these guys had their top offensive line only play together for 30% of the snaps or 35% of the snaps. It was just repetitive like that, and we see that kind of play the whole way through. And so it is, you know, it is fascinating that way. And then from a defensive perspective, I don't really think it's a change, but it's just a reminder that everybody always needs a better corners and everybody always needs a better pass rush. Like that's kind of where we are. And that's why, as we go through, you know, the first round next week, you know, this time next week, we'll be heading into the first round. You're going to see a lot of those positions go, and we're going to see a lot of edge players go. We're going to see a lot of corners go in that first round in those first 2 days, because it's as important as ever. And we seem to like have a need for every one of them. We need to be 3 or 4 deep to really have that good unit, really insulate ourselves from, you know, those injuries. And it's just every team, I feel like I could put defensive front and I could put cornerback as a need for almost every single team. And it's just continuing to go that way every single year we do this.
Yeah, you never have enough offensive linemen, pass rushers, or pass catchers ever.
Yep,
there's no team that ever says like that we're good.
Yeah, we're happy. Yeah, exactly.
So we've got a lot in store for you guys over the course of the next hour. A couple things to put on your schedule right now. First of all, we've got a show next Tuesday where we're going to be running through draft props with Ryan McChrystal, one of the best mock drafters out there. He's identified a lot of matches and some plus EV bets that you guys should be making right now and on Tuesday. So we're going to be walking through that with you guys on Tuesday. NFL draft first round starts Thursday night. We have a very special edition of the Sharp Football Show that is going to kick off around pick 23 of the NFL draft and then take you home all the way home after the NFL draft. So we will be with you talking shop at the end of the draft and then also for the next 45 minutes to an hour after the draft concludes. So we're going to be running through the late part of the draft with you guys to give you all of our immediate reactions. So make sure that you guys kind of send a mental note, a mental alarm, set something on your phone. Just to remember, we're not going to be with you at the beginning of the draft. You guys go have your beers, watch the show, enjoy the broadcast of the draft. But then at the tail end, when you want some deeper analysis of what you saw in the first 22 picks and then what we're seeing live at the end, you're going to want to join us right here on the Sharp Football Analysis channel on YouTube. So make sure that you head over here and subscribe to the show because that's where we're going to be able to serve you up on Thursday night. Really looking forward to it. As Ray said, 1 week away. Also, in addition, head over to sharp.football and jump onto our newsletter. It's 100% free to sign up. And this newsletter will be with you every step of the way as we react to the NFL draft, as we get you ready for the draft with different articles for draft props, for mock drafts. You know, Ryan and Brendan Donahue, there goes my highlighter. Ryan and Brendan Donahue are two of the most accurate mock drafters in the NFL community historically from an accuracy perspective. They're some of the best, and they will be dropping their final predictions of who they think is going to go where on Thursday morning up at sharpfootballanalysis.com. We'll be sending those articles out to you as well on the mailing list on Thursday so that you don't have to worry about trying to track them down. They'll be right there on your in your inbox. So go to sharp.football and sign up for the 100% free newsletter. We'll keep you up to date with everything pre-draft, post-draft, and into the offseason, where we'll be covering all the teams and how we expect them to perform in 2025. So,
can I say something about Ryan just real quick? I want to make this
absolutely.
point, like to your point about keeping up with this as we see these lines move, especially if you're interested in betting. There's a ton of stuff now available to bet on the draft. We were all very disappointed by the lack of betting lines for the combine and for 40s, and then nobody even ran, and so it was a big disaster. And so I was worried what we're going to see here for the draft. And there's been a lot of stuff come out, and we've seen a lot of good lines already leave. I'm thinking about the line opened for like first round players from the Big Ten at like 8.5, it just wasn't a good line. And Ryan put that out pretty much immediately into an article over at Sharp Football Analysis. The last time I saw it, it was already up to 9.5. And so like that number's moving. It's not where you want to bet now, but Ryan's so good at identifying those lines when they're wrong and when they're bad and getting on the right side of them. So make sure you're keeping up with him. Follow him on Twitter, on Blue Sky, everywhere. Just, one of the best in the business for sure.
Yeah, and whether you're looking at the big boards, like the top 100s, Ryan is top 10 in terms of accuracy over the last 5 years. You're looking at the first round, which is the first 32 picks that are drafted on Thursday night. He's top 10 most accurate over the last 5 years there, as well as is Brendan Donahue. So, like I said, catch these guys.
Yeah, I don't want to short Brendan Donahue. Brendan's actually second over the last 5 years, second among all mock drafters. Ryan just wrote that article about the props, but yeah, Brendan's second. Like just the predictive ability of these two guys really amazes me, and I really like it because they stopped me from doing really dumb things like putting a lot of money on Shedeur Sanders going to the Browns, which is what I intended to do about a month ago, and they both convinced me. They both convinced me not to, and I appreciate both of them for that service.
Rich, are you getting into the draft props at all this season? I know over the last couple of years, you guys get those up in Ohio.
We do get them. I haven't seen anything that really like struck me as something I want to get down on yet, but I haven't really perused a lot of Ryan's work because, I've been too busy trying to figure out what team needs like a third tight end, for the last month. So we're almost out of the coming up for air on that regard.
The doldrums are almost done.
You've really reached the nihilism hours for Rich and I going through these team needs. As Rich always says, doing something for all 32 teams sounds great, like at the beginning and through those like first 6 teams, and then you start to regret every decision you've ever made. But we're almost there. We're almost home, so we're feeling good. We're feeling good.
So speaking of which, let's talk about one of these teams and how badly they must nail the NFL draft to avoid players, coaches, GMs having issues after this upcoming season. Miami Dolphins owner Stephen Ross set expectations for head coach Mike McDaniel and general manager Chris Grier, including that this season, Miami wins its first postseason game in 25 years. No team has gone as long without a playoff win as the Miami Dolphins. After having bottom 5 draft capital for 3 straight seasons, the Dolphins have above average draft capital this season. In fact, the Dolphins have almost as much draft capital this year as they had in 2022 and 2023 combined. Their offensive line crippled the offense last year, and they have just lost their best offensive lineman to retirement in Terron Armstead. Their line this year is considerably worse on paper than last year's line, and last year's line was pretty bad. They ranked number 28 in pass blocking, number 26 in run blocking, number 32 in running back stuff rate, and number 31 in short yardage conversion rate. So, Rich, Miami finally has draft capital this year after having number 32 2 years ago, number 32 3 years ago. Now they've got above average draft capital. What do they need to come out of this draft with to change the fortunes of this team?
Yeah, Miami's the real cautionary tale, and how aggressively to push the chips in, given where they are right now, because now both their GM and head coach got their feet against the fire, even though they, from a wins perspective, they've been largely fine these past 3 years under Mike McDaniel. It's been the punching up aspect and then the continual decline of what McDaniel's bread and butter is on the offensive side of the ball that is kind of impacting where the expectations are now saying, hey, you're on the hot seat now. And you look at what this offensive line has, how it's deteriorated and how it's impacted the offense. I mean, Tua Tagovailoa threw the highest rate of passes at or behind the line of scrimmage of his career last season. It was at 31%. In his first year with Mike McDaniel, it was only 17%. Then it was 27%. It's almost doubled in just a 3-year span. He was 34th in the league in rate of passes to go 10 or more yards downfield. His first year with Mike McDaniel was 44.8%. Last year it was 27.1%. He was dead last in rate of throws to go 20 or more yards downfield. As a result, the Dolphins only had 3 passing touchdowns from outside of the red zone last year. Like, this is a team with way too many playmakers and explosive playmakers to not create those types of plays. And it all comes back to the offensive line. They couldn't keep anyone healthy. They were subpar and then couldn't keep anyone healthy, right? Like, their most frequent offensive line combination, 35% of their offensive snaps. Terron Armstead missed 2 games. He's now retired. Austin Jackson at right tackle missed 9 games due to injury. And Austin Jackson's a guy that they didn't even really hit on in the draft that they extended. They draft Patrick Paul in the 2nd round last year. He's now thrown into a starting left tackle job in the NFL. He did play 248 snaps at left tackle as a rookie, but he also was 68th amongst tackles and pressure rate allowed as a rookie. He was 82nd out of 85 qualifying tackles and grade at PFF. They did add James Daniels, which was an upgrade over what they had, and they still have Aaron Brewer at center, which are 2 positive interior pieces. But even from a contractual stance, Liam Eichenberg's in the final year of his contract, so they have to attack offensive line early in this draft, and I think we're going to see them draft multiple offensive linemen.
Yeah, we know that Tua gets rid of the ball super quickly, but last year, even though they were doing that, they were so predictable because that target depth has been decreasing and they've been throwing all those short passes. And of course, we were taking advantage of that with some of the player props to the tight ends in terms of the catches, because they're just throwing it underneath to guys that really shouldn't be targeted nearly as much as they were, just because that offensive line was so terrible and Tua was still getting a lot of pressure. Ray, what do you think some of the biggest areas of need are for the Miami Dolphins, whether it's offense or defense?
And I just want to point out, in addition to that, and how important the offensive line is we saw the running game struggle, which is not something we would expect given, the history we've seen with Mike McDaniel and that, and where he comes from. And we saw just the absolute efficiency destruction of Devin Achane, right? And what we saw, and you mentioned, we were happy to bet Devin Achane over on receptions, and that really paid, good dividends for us. But why they were doing that is because they just couldn't get him going in the running game. So it was tough. And then you talk about the offensive line and you say, okay, well, if that's their one concern, given they have 10 picks, I believe, then okay, maybe we can fix that. But then you look at defense, and the defense is just, it's not in a good spot at all. And we talk about the defensive line. They probably have one starter level player there with Seiler. And so that's a good spot, with him, but you need some additions. You lose, Calais Campbell, you lose Deshaun Hand. You look on the edge, and if you just kind of like take a 10,000-foot view of the edge, it looks pretty good. They really hit on Chop Robinson, Penn State legend. Chop Robinson, thank you very much. 17.2% pressure rate as a rookie. That's sandwiched between Micah Parsons and Nick Bosa. That's where you want your guy to be. And then they also have Bradley Chubb and Jalen Phillips, but Chubb, coming back, didn't play last year. Phillips suffered another injury last year. He's on his fifth-year option. You have no long-term, stability there with Phillips, and you don't know how good those guys are going to be. That's another area you could point to. Is this a need? And then the secondary, it's just with what they lost in free agency with Javon Holland and Jordan Poyer. Poyer still is a free agent. Maybe he comes back. And now with this Jalen Ramsey stuff, you say, what even is this secondary? Who's going to start in this secondary? They do have, a good slot corner there with Kohu, but he's also entering the final year of his contract. So there are so many needs along the defensive side. And if we were just talking about the offensive line and saying, all right, we get this offensive line better, we figured out how to make Tyreek Hill happy, I guess, we get, Devin Achane back to what we saw as a rookie, and then maybe we're cooking a little bit, but you're gonna have to use so many picks on the defensive side of the ball. You're gonna have to really hit on those picks for this defense to be what you need it to be. And you start to look at this team, and I was surprised. I didn't think, they're coming off a bad year. We obviously know they have issues, but I was surprised how bad it was really on defense when I dug deep. And we're in, they're on this list for a reason. We're in a bad spot here with the Dolphins, and kind of looking forward to the future and what this team is going to look like, who's going to be in charge of this team in a couple of years. This is a very pivotal moment for them heading into this draft.
Yeah, I think it is. And it was a good call to discuss the Miami Dolphins, just because there are such lofty aspirations, and they did take such a step backwards that now we do see finally an owner being very fed up. And this is the case for a number of these teams. An owner is finally fed up with, what is the trajectory of our team? What are we really going to be able to get out of this? Is Tua going to be the guy to be able to take us to where we want to go? Are we surrounding him properly with the right pieces? Do I have the right general manager making these decisions for the franchise in terms of who we're selecting, who we're trading, who we're letting go? Do we have the right head coach to run the show? And so there's a lot of big decisions that could be made after the 2025 NFL season for the Miami Dolphins. Before we get to the next team, I do want to acknowledge we've got a number of guys here in the chat. If you guys want to be chatting with us, feel free. Exile, longtime follower here of our live shows. Great to see you here as well. Ryan asked about the futures content, and I just pulled up some of the futures records. Last year, we do have a futures package. It's available right now to purchase over at sharpfootballanalysis.com. Last year, a $100 bettor made over $2,098 in profit betting our futures package. We had a great year betting futures. 64% win rate on non-long shot bets with that futures package. We had a number of team futures. We had a number of player futures. Rich and Ray both contribute to that package along with myself and others. And it was extremely, extremely profitable, 54% return on investment. So you can head over to sharpfootballanalysis.com to go ahead and look more into the futures package if you are interested. Good to see Better Boss here as well. And Mile High Luke says Rich is the man. Yes, indeed, Mile High. Rich is the man. So with that being said, let's talk about another team that is in desperate need to hit in the NFL draft this season. After 5 straight losing seasons, the Bengals seemingly turned the corner with Joe Burrow in his sophomore season. A trip to the Super Bowl in 2021 was followed by a 12-win season and a trip to the AFC Championship in 2022. And it seemed like the Bengals were on the precipice of a dynastic run through the AFC North, stacking back-to-back first-place finishes. But the last 2 years, they finished just one game over 500, and they did not make the playoffs, and they finished in 3rd or 4th place in the AFC North in both years. Last year, Joe Burrow did his best to carry the Cincinnati Bengals. Despite a career-high pressure rate, Burrow had a career year in development. Career high accuracy, career high completion rate, career high third down conversion rate, and his lowest interception rate since his rookie season. And yet the Cincinnati Bengals won only 9 games and missed the playoffs. Ray, what does this team need to do in this draft to get back on track? We've seen such great things from Joe Burrow over his short NFL career. It really isn't a very long career yet. It seems like he's been here forever, but it is not really that long of a career. But they need to get back on track badly after they set the bar pretty high those first couple of seasons. What do they do in this NFL draft?
Well, the first thing I want to mention is that that jacket is amazing. And also, I'm excited to see the theater room back in play. I hadn't seen the theater room back in play, so I'm very, very excited to see that.
It's back. It's back, baby. It's back.
It's exciting. But I think, like, to your question, the answer is very simply on defense. So that was one when we were debating kind of what teams we were going to talk about. It is tough because, obviously Rich writes up the offense. I write up the defense for each of these teams. And on offense, you can make some cases for what the Bengals need. But really, this is defense. And they have 6 draft picks. Most of them are going to have to be spent on defense because if you look at it, you could make an argument that at every level of this defense, they need a starter. Now, perhaps they look at cornerback. They obviously made a defensive coordinator change. They did that for a reason. You could say they look at cornerback. They've spent a lot of draft capital there. Maybe they think coaching was the issue. We're going to see some guys take some steps forward. You could also, say that maybe they're fine at safety, even though Geno Stone is, going into a contract year, wasn't particularly great his first season with the Bengals either. Was that a coaching issue? So maybe you put the secondary aside. I still think they have needs there. But then you look at the rest of this roster. They need at least one starter along the defensive line. They have to keep Trey Hendrickson because behind that, you're not excited about anything that's there. They didn't hit on Myles Murphy. That hasn't worked out. That's actually a kind of a story of this defense is just not really hitting on some of these early draft picks. Jermaine Pratt, it seems like he's gone. The new linebackers coach, I don't even think mentioned him a couple days ago when he was talking about the linebackers. So he's gone. They probably need a linebacker. And then, like I said, I think they need help both, at cornerback and at safety as well. And so, this defense just needs a massive influx of talent, and they only have 6 draft picks. How are they going to do that? I'm not sure. And despite all of that, despite how bad the defense was last year, maybe Al Golden comes in and, he's able to get more out of this defense than what they did last year. They still probably should have been a playoff team. They lost a couple games. They probably should have been a playoff team. That's how good Joe Burrow is. That's how good this offense can be. But if they want to reach the levels that you were talking about, that Super Bowl trip, they have to get better on this side of the ball. They need more talent on this side of the ball. And I'm a little bit worried that they think too much of what happened last year was on Lou Anarumo and on the defensive coaching staff. And they don't see some of these needs as big as I think they probably are.
That's a great last statement there, because I 100% agree. We talked for several years about the adjustments and the tricks and the second half change-ups that Lou Anarumo would bring, especially when playing against Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs, to try to foil some of the things that Andy Reid and Mahomes were doing there. And we viewed Lou Anarumo in very positive light, and they get rid of him. And if he's the scapegoat and they don't realize the lack of talent that they've got there on the defensive side of the ball and try to address it quickly enough, then we're going to be in a similar situation next year, because I don't think Al Golden is suddenly a massive improvement over what Big Lou was bringing this team. But Rich, you look at the offensive side of the ball, and as Ray mentioned, and I did as well, this is the Joe Burrow show. What does Joe need around him to really try to maybe outscore teams by an even larger degree if the defense still is a little bit of a problem in 2025?
Yeah, I think these first 2 teams we touched upon too, that's something to talk about. The coordinators are, Mike McDaniel's not a coordinator, but he's obviously running the offense, that no matter how good these guys are, you still need players. You still need players to make things work. And, something can make a, offense fall apart or defense fall apart very quickly, even one that was successful. The Bengals on offense, I'm really just begging them not to fall in the trap of using premier capital on a running back, right? Like I'm with Ray, everything Ray talked about, this team needs to get better defensively, because, in the AFC playoffs, you have to stop Patrick Mahomes. You have to stop Lamar Jackson. You have to stop Josh Allen. You have to stop probably multiple of those quarterbacks to get to a Super Bowl. And that defense just needs so much help. So I'm begging them to not, fall into the trap of saying, well, what if we just added another playmaker on offense?
Yeah.
You have Chase Brown for dirt cheap for 2 years. He showed that he could carry a high workload and be a productive back down the back half of the season. Now, you don't want to give him 96% of the backfield touches again, like he had over that span, but you already had Samaj P. Ryan as like a veteran guy to come in and play in passing downs if you need to. They still have Zach Moss hanging around. If you want to use a late day 3 pick on a running back for insurance, by all means do it. But that premier capital, just don't fall into that trap. And then they have to find a way to continue. It's been tried since in the Burrow era. They've got to find a way to try to continue to get this offensive line right too. Burrow was so good and was able to overcome it. A lot was just volume and game scripts the Bengals played in. Like, they don't want Joe Burrow leading the NFL in pass attempts every year, even though they want to be an aggressive passing offense. The only offensive lineman starter that they have that's younger than 29 is Amarius Mims, and the other starters that they have really were subpar last year. I mean, they can get out of Orlando Brown's contract as early as this year. Cordell Volson's going to be a free agent after the season. Like, this is a team that definitely still needs to address and calibrate the offensive line as they move on as well. So please, Bengals, don't use an early pick on a running back.
I do think there's a comment actually here, though, I think from Mile High Luke, that says there's so many good runners in this draft, right? Yeah, if they used a day 3 pick on one of those, like, bruising guys, I think that we're fine about it. But yeah, first of all, don't ruin all of the Chase Brown dynasty shares that I have, please, Bengals. He's wonderful, just let him cook. But also, yeah, to that point, like, recognize where the issue is, I hope, and really move things in that direction.
Absolutely. And as we talk through some of these teams, remember, we are hitting on some of the teams that we believe must hit on the draft at a very strong rate because they need it so badly, an inflection point with their franchise. But we're covering all 32 teams. So if you don't see your team mentioned or there's a team that you're interested in, head on over to sharpfootballanalysis.com. Rich and Ray went through all 32 teams. We're getting the last couple up here over the next couple of days, but we're through like 28, 29 of these teams already. And as you've seen, scroll through the screen, and we cover so much with these teams when we're breaking down their team needs. We're not just hitting on what are the voids that this team needs. We are examining their rosters in depth, their depth charts. Where do each positional room on this team, where do they rank? Where do they land? How deep are they in those different groups? What did they do last year and contribute? We're looking at their draft capital. We're looking at their strength of schedule. So I can't encourage it enough. These two guys did outstanding work over at sharpfootballanalysis.com. Make sure that you head over there and peruse the team needs for all 32 teams here over the next several days as we enter the NFL draft. And then it's also not a bad thing. I mean, we're not going to push these quite as much, but it's not a bad thing to recircle back to these team needs after they draft their players in the draft, because it's still interesting to see where some voids might be as you're starting to plan your own futures betting strategy for 2025. Let's move on to another team that we really believe needs to nail the NFL draft this year. The San Francisco 49ers have the #1 easiest schedule in the NFL in 2025 and the #6 most draft capital of any team in the NFL draft. In fact, it's the most draft capital they've had since 2019. But their roster might have the most needs it's had since 2019 as well. And this team is off its most disappointing season under Kyle Shanahan. Expected to win the NFC West, the 49ers went 6-11 and missed the playoffs for the first time since 2020. After 4 NFC Championship appearances and 2 Super Bowl trips in the past 5 years, a big rebound is needed to maximize the 49ers championship window given Purdy's low cap hit. The roster has talent, but it's not cheap, including well-paid players like Nick Bosa, Trent Williams, Fred Warner, George Kittle, and Christian McCaffrey. They must hit on some of these draft picks to add solid talent on the cheap.
I think Warren has perhaps gone to Friesland. So I'll take over from here. Yeah, I think that when we were looking at the 49ers, when you and I are discussing the 49ers, like we are in this kind of pivotal moment for them as they look to, switch this roster and transition this roster into what the next stage will be with Brock Purdy on a second contract. And, they lost some really key guys on defense are players that have been key guys for them. I know you don't think that losing Drake Greenlaw and Charvarius Ward and Talanoa Hafwanga, I believe I got that right. I don't believe you. I know that you don't think that matters. I particularly think that matters. They lost those guys.
I think Ward matters. I think the other two aren't
fair.
as big of losses as you.
Fair enough. I mean, you could be wrong, but like you look at it, and this is all part of that transition, right? As we move into this next stage of kind of where they are. And as I look at this defense specifically, I think you look at the defensive line, the edge rushers, and you start to see kind of how bad it's gotten there. Obviously, they have, Nick Bosa, but we saw Leonard Floyd leave. Who's really behind him? Are we relying on Yetur Gross-Matos? I'm not going to say bad things about him because he's obviously also a Penn State legend. But who are they relying on there? Who are they relying on long term there? That's a real problem. They probably thought that this was going to be Drake Jackson, but he obviously has the injury issues that have showed up. And then along the defensive line, you lose Malik Collins, you lose Javon Hargrave. You already weren't great there to begin with. Like arguably, you need two starters. And then, like I said, they did lose some players in the other parts. Further back in the defense. I think they're probably going to be fine. Maybe they're going to add some, at corner. Maybe they look to add some at safety. We'll see what they think about, Jair Brown. Again, we're just going through all these Penn State players. We'll see how they feel about that. But overall, like this defensive front, that's one spot they really have to focus on if they're hoping this defense, takes a step forward, with Robert Saleh back in command of it.
Yeah, we're seeing the 49ers have to calibrate for this, pending contract extension and, start to really gear up for this pending contract extension that Brock Purdy is going to get because he's in the last year of his rookie contract. There's no fifth-year option. They have the franchise tag available, obviously, if something stalls out there. But you start to see the moving pieces because they do have a top-heavy roster. I mean, you look at the guys that are still on the roster. I mean, they still have Trent Williams making a lot of money. You still have Fred Warner making a lot of money. You have Bosa making a lot of money. Like, they're going to have to potentially pay George Kittle. Christian McCaffrey's making a lot of money for his position. They extended Brandon Ayuk last year. So when you have those contracts, you have to lose some of those pieces that are maybe some of the glue guys that you talked about, the Greenlaws and the Wards. Like those guys end up they end up becoming expendable because you have such this high dollar allocation to those other players, and then you're going to have to pay a quarterback now, which they haven't had to do for a number of years, and they're just gearing up for that. I'm with you though. I think they should focus on the defensive side of the ball early. If they do dabble, it would be offensive line would be a spot where they would go, but this is a team that I hope they don't fall into the trap of saying they've got draft capital. Let's be aggressive and trade up, because you've started to hear them in like whispers of potentially trying to move up for a guy. They have 4 top 100 picks. They have 7 top picks in the top 150. They need to buckshot those because you're going to miss on some of these guys, but you definitely want to fire ammunition in those spots, especially when you're trying to get pass rushers and offensive linemen. Trent Williams is going to be 37 years old. He finally, missed a lot of time last year. He missed 7 games. We saw the impact that he had on when he was out. Colton McKivitz is in the final year of his contract at right tackle. They do lose Aaron Banks, but again, like you can find interior linemen. They found one last year in Dominic Pooney, but the offensive tackle, and for the future, if you're going to be paying a quarterback, you want that offensive tackle spot lined up. That would be the one spot if they're going to get aggressive on offense to kind of calibrate around. George Kittle, also pending free agent after this season, not going to be cheap. So that's the price of success, right? And the 49ers have built a team that's, playing for Super Bowls, and they do have that good schedule to lean on them, but they have more holes than they've had in recent years. And fortunate for them that they have that draft capital to try to plug these holes. Don't be cute and try to trade up though.
And so that is my major concern because of kind of the history we have here. And like, to your point, where they need, like, defensive line stands out, and you can include edge in that, stand out as these big needs. That happens to be, I'm not a draft scout. I would never pretend to be. I'm not watching these guys close, but as I read people I trust, that appears to be part of the draft that is deep, right? So we want to take multiple shots there. We don't want to trade up and try to, I guess unless you're trading up for Abdul Carter. We can't get away from the Penn State. Just great job, James Franklin, recruiting. But if you're trading up for Abdul Carter, but they're not probably going to be able to do that and get that high, you want to take multiple of these guys, and you really want to take that shot and really build up this defensive line and build it up cheap, because that's the key. If we're going to win on this second contract for Brock Purdy, we're going to have to build these guys up cheaply. We're going to have to really hit on these draft, and their draft history is, It's checkered, right? Are we going to spend another third round pick on a running back? I don't know. You maybe even could like say that they need to with,
they're going to take a running back. Believe it.
Will it be the third round? I don't know. But yeah, you want to take multiple shots on the defensive line and the edge. That's really where they need to focus. Offensive line as well. And it just so happens they've got a lot of draft picks, and it just so happens that those three areas probably play into the strength, at least the depth of this draft. And so they're in a good spot. Like you said, they just need to make sure they do the right things as we get here.
Yeah, the last 3 years, they've had 30th, 28th, and 21st draft capital. And if you have such little draft capital and you're not hitting on enough of those picks at a high enough rate, then you are going to be in a position like they are right now, where they have some top end talent through some guys they maybe acquired via trade or drafted years or years ago that are being well paid. And then you don't have much beyond that because you haven't had enough swings at the plate to really accumulate some ability to miss enough. And now they finally have that sixth most draft capital. So they've got to hit on some of these guys because that roster is really top end loaded from a dollar perspective. Let's talk about another team that really needs to hit for different reasons. This is not the same type of team like a Cincinnati Bengals that's had some success in the past, or that's like the San Francisco 49ers has had a lot of recent success in the past. A totally different type of team, but they need to hit the draft. The Chicago Bears have not won a playoff game since 2020, but no fan base has more hope for a team with 7 wins or less in 4 straight seasons than the Chicago Bears fan base. They made a big investment in new head coach Ben Johnson. They made a big investment in their offensive line, replacing both guards and their center in free agency. Between the new staff and the new offensive line, the hope is to establish a better environment for Caleb Williams to succeed. He was sacked 68 times last season. He lost a 108.5 EPA on those sacks, the second worst for any quarterback since at least 2000. Ray, I mentioned in kind of the intro that this is a different type of team than we've been discussing that's had higher expectations. In fact, this is kind of the only team that's on this list that really has underperformed, underwhelmed, and done pretty poorly over the last several years. Yet they're one of the teams that you think must hit in the NFL draft. What is it about the Chicago Bears, maybe from a trajectory standpoint for the franchise with the new staff or with a young quarterback, that you feel they really need to make sure that they have a lot of success when they leave the 2025 NFL draft?
Well, I think, they're the perfect post-hype team. And I think when you look at what this roster is, that hype last year, I don't think it was unwarranted. And I mean, we remember where they were. We remember how they finished the season, right? But before that Hail Mary game that seemingly changed the course of both the Commanders and the Bears season, the Bears weren't, they were in a pretty good spot there. And that was with, some more issues as well. You mentioned the offensive line and what they've done already this offseason to bring that up. They also made the same type of investments along the defensive front as well, bringing in Grady Jarrett, bringing in Dayo Odeyingbo. Like they wanted to make these additions. My question with this team and my concern about this team, not as much on the offensive line front, although Rich can talk to that and kind of where he feels based on where they are. But I don't know if these additions they've made to the defensive front actually, solve their problems. Where Grady Jarrett is in his career, is he really kind of solving the problems you have up front? He has 4 sacks total over the last 2 seasons, 8.1% pressure rate. That is not the Grady Jarrett that we came to love earlier in his career with the Falcons. Is he still that guy? With Dayo, you're talking about he had a 10% pressure rate last year. That was the best of his career. That's promising that we see, that progression for him, but that's not a good rate for an edge rusher, right? And even if he hits, and even if he continues that growth, and he's better here with the Bears, they still need depth behind him, behind Sweat. And so I look at both those positions and I see those 2 additions, and I worry that they think, all right, well, we're good here. We don't really need to focus, because I think those are 2 areas they still need to build. We saw, Gordon get his extension. They have their 3 guys at corner, but we saw that kind of slump. Is that fixed with, the coordinator change? Does that, make everything kind of work there? We've got some, older players, some injury concerns at safety. So I look at this defense and I think, well, they've made additions. And when I look at this depth chart, I don't see anything that stands out as like a glaring need. But I also think it could be better. And I'm hopeful that they continue trying to build on that side of the ball while, making sure that, we get Caleb Williams where he needs to be. And if we're going to do that and, we build on defense and we get Caleb Williams better in his sophomore season, then we're really talking about a competitive team. But I still think they have those steps to take before they really reach what maybe we thought they could have been last year.
Yeah, I think it's good to start on that side of the ball because everybody does want to focus, and we will also in the second on the offensive side of the ball because it's sexier. We've got Caleb Williams. We need to protect him. We've got a new head coach in Ben Johnson. Everybody's a big Ben Johnson fan with what he was doing with the Detroit Lions, all the trick plays, creativity, running up the score at times. It was a lot of fun to watch. But this defense, one of the best ways to help your quarterback is to put him in a situation where you're leading in games late. And to do that, oftentimes you do need a performance on that defensive side of the ball. You need to have both sides of the ball performing well. So if the defense is performing a little bit better, it will naturally take a little bit more pressure off of Caleb Williams, allow him to turn around and hand the football off more frequently rather than dropping back to pass in known passing situations, trailing in the second half of games and really giving the defense a little bit of an edge on your offensive line in some of those spots. But Rich, let's pivot a little bit to the offensive side of the ball here for the Chicago Bears. They obviously revamped that offensive line starting in the middle there with their two guards and their starting center. How much more do they need to do to help Caleb Williams, and where do you see them going in the NFL draft this year?
Yeah, they definitely shouldn't stop and say what we've done so far and just rest on that and say we fixed the offensive line. I mean, obviously you have Joe Thuney is going to be 33 this season. Jonah Jackson hasn't played a full season since 2021. So you still need more guys. Again, that's how we let off the show. Like you're going to lose guys in a 17-game season. You're not going to have all 5 offensive linemen be available. Week 1 and through week 17. They've got Braxton Jones is slated to be an unrestricted free agent. He only played in 5 games last year. They did use a 3rd-round pick on Kyron Amejiji. I just botched his last name, but he was really awful in his small sample that he got to play as a rookie. So they got to keep drafting bodies up front. They have those 2 picks at the top of the 2nd round. I know they're going to be tempted to take a running back with one of those picks, and they probably will. We're just have to gear up and prepare for that. But because of Ben Johnson, where he comes from and the kind of the system they ran in Detroit, I think what's most exciting about the Bears is we're going to get to see some truths of Ben Johnson. We're going to find out how much was Ben Johnson, right? Can he calibrate the shortcomings that Caleb Williams had? He has different problems than what Jared Goff had. Jared Goff was a totally different quarterback than Caleb Williams. Caleb Williams took 17 sacks that were credited as his own fault last year, and that was a problem he had in college, coming into the NFL. 18.7% of his pressures were self-induced. So even if you have an offensive line that's blocking, the tendencies that he likes to play with, we see a little with Shedeur Sanders coming in the NFL too, and it's probably why he's slipping a little bit. But he never had the upside per play like Caleb Williams had. But some of this also is Caleb Williams' fault that why the offensive line performed to the degree it did last year too. So don't be shy to keep drafting offensive linemen, Bears, even though you've picked up a couple veterans this year.
And I think to that point, so I still contend that what the Bears had on offensive line last year, we ran through this with Justin Fields over and over again, where we kept having to say, what's the chicken and the egg here?
Yeah.
And I do think that we had still some of that with Caleb Williams. I like the upgrades that they made. I think it's good that they're upgrading around him, but ultimately, we know that pressure and sacks, quarterbacks play a very large role in that. And like you said, and I think this is the bigger concern, is this was the concern with Caleb Williams, coming out of college. Can Ben Johnson fix that? Can the new coaching staff fix that? We have a lot of faith in him. And I would say that we would probably say yes is the answer to that question. But yeah, that is a concern. And to your point, even if we fix the offensive line, if we have the best offensive line in the league, is this going to be a long-term problem for us with Caleb Williams? That's a serious question. But ultimately, the front office can just do what they can do, which is surround him with good players, bolster that defensive front. And if they do that, even in this good division, I think that this roster is talented enough to compete. And so ultimately, that's the benchmark for where we are with them.
They had some of the most mind-numbing coaching decisions, in my opinion, over the last several years. And I definitely think that they were aggressive to get Ben Johnson, and it's going to pay off for them because they need that help. And I think a good coach, a good game plan, good play calling can overcome some of the deficiencies in pairing Caleb Williams with Ben Johnson is definitely going to help smooth out some of those rough edges and get him in the right direction. So this team is not that many pieces away from being respectable. They've underwhelmed. The question now becomes, I think that they will potentially meet expectations, is can they exceed expectations here in the near future, because that's what they want to do with a quarterback on a rookie deal that they drafted so high in Caleb Williams. Speaking of another team that was in this same exact situation last year, entering year two, thinking that we were going to get some growth out of a quarterback who played a lot better in his rookie season than did Caleb Williams, we have the Houston Texans. Why do they need to nail the NFL draft? The Houston Texans took a massive step back in the 2024 NFL season, and that was led by a big step back from quarterback C.J. Stroud. The promising rookie from 2023 slumped badly in 2024. While the team did win a playoff game in his second season, the offense ranked 29th, his passing attack ranked 27th, his accuracy was bottom 5, the pass protection was problematic, and the run game lacked consistency. Stroud looked like a shell of the quarterback from 2024 and was sacked 52 times, second only to Caleb Williams. That led the Texans to firing offensive coordinator Bobby Slowick. Houston must improve the offense if it wants to maximize Stroud's rookie contract window. But they have key holes left by departures along the offensive line and the receiving corps. And they don't have much capital to work with. After 2022 and 2023, when the Texans had the number 1 and the number 2 most draft capital, they have just the number 25 most draft capital this year. So, Rich, why is it so important that the Houston Texans make their picks count? Because unlike the 49ers, they don't have a lot of them, 25th in draft capital. It's got to work out for them.
Yeah, this reminds me a lot of where the kind of the 49ers were the last few years, but on a worse team, like a little bit of a worse team than the 49ers. They're not a tried and true Super Bowl contender like the 49ers were. And you saw just the impact of the loss of playmakers in the receiving game and the offensive line, and just really put CJ Stroud, and he just developed a lot of bad habits over the course of his second season. It reminded me a lot of what happened to Justin Herbert, like in year 3, where like just when Keenan Allen and Mike Williams got hurt and the offensive line got hurt and everyone started to just dog on Herbert. And it's just like, you need all these things to kind of work out for you at the quarterback position still, no matter how talented you are. And CJ Stroud had the highest rate of any quarterback in the NFL last year of plays that lost 1 EPA or worse in the NFL, worse than Anthony Richardson, worse than Will Levis. Like 21.1% of his dropbacks were -1 EPA or worse. That just shouldn't be an outcome for a player like CJ Stroud. He actually had fewer dropbacks last year with Tank Dell and Nico Collins on the field than he did as a rookie. We were all excited about having the trio of Dell, Collins, and Diggs. We only threw 66 passes with those guys on the field. And then it all comes back to, the state of this offensive line and where they have kind of taken things in a direction this offseason. Not only were they bad, they were another team. They were only played their starters 35% of the snaps last year. There were rumors that the offensive line room behind closed doors was a problem. D'Amico Ryans downplayed that. But then when you saw what they did, they trade Laramie Tunsil as probably – maybe there's some truth to that. And then also potentially clearing some contract space. Then they trade away Kenyon Green, who underperformed in his rookie contract. They get rid of Shaq Mason. Like, these are guys that were starting for them. And then you look at what they've done this offseason. They've just thrown guys at the position. Like, they just have signed veterans where it's literally like the Arrested Development meme. Like, these guys haven't worked out for everyone else. Maybe they'll work out for us. They bring in Cam Robinson, who is an outright disaster last year for Jacksonville and Minnesota when he went to them. They're going to move Titus Howard from right tackle to left guard. Juice Scruggs has played some center and right guard, so they're going to see what works out for him. But then Ed Ingram, who's been just awful. Every year I've been doing these team needs for like 5 years, and I swear to God, every year I write up Ed Ingram was like, he's at the bottom of like pressure rate allowed and one of the worst graded offensive linemen in the league, and he just keeps finding his way on rosters. They bring in Laken Tomlinson from Seattle. Seattle didn't want you. Like, Seattle is like, we're good. We don't want you. They bring in Trent Brown, who just hasn't really played any games. There was a time where Trent Brown actually was a really good player. He just hasn't played it. He's only played 14 games the past 2 years. So they're just like, it's like literally like King Moonracer is building the island of misfit toys. This is another team, like they better hammer offensive line very early, because none of these guys that they've brought in have worked out anywhere else. So why would we believe that they're going to work out here?
I get the Arrested Development analogy that
Gotcha.
hits home to me. You got me on that one. The King Moonracer, I probably should know that one. That's obviously one that Ray will get a little bit more. Not my wheelhouse, but in the wheelhouse.
You don't like? Hold on. You don't like Christmas? Like, is Christmas isn't in your wheelhouse? What are we talking about? It's the claymation Christmas movie. It's Rudolph.
What do you mean? Oh, that's a character in Rudolph. He's on the island of Misfit Tools.
He's the lion that runs the island.
Oh, okay, yeah. So I've seen that little show many times, but never knew the guy's name. Okay, so hey, I'm learning something.
We're learning together. Yeah.
The -1 EPA you mentioned, him leading the NFL. That's crazy. Obviously, we saw that in the playoff game against the Chargers, where they're losing. What was it, 6-0 early second quarter? He's at his own 14-yard line. Drop back to pass on. I think it was like 3rd and 6, 3rd and 8, something like that. Throws a terrible interception. It was like, oh my God, here we go with the Houston Texans blowing this game at home. They end up coming back and beating the LA Chargers there, but too many of those types of plays where he felt like he had to do too much. And if we can get him in a better mindset where he doesn't feel like he has to do so much and the team is performing better around him, the offensive line is protecting him a little bit better, CJ Stroud will be able to rebound in year 3. Ray, on the defensive side of the ball, what are some things that you are looking for the Houston Texans to capitalize on with the draft capital that they do have in 2025?
I mean, I think they're actually, for the most part, they're in a good spot. You can, pick some spots and say, their secondary, they probably need more depth in their secondary. I actually put defensive back as a need. And I do think they need that. But I mean, they really hit on 2 guys last year in the secondary with Lassiter and Bullock. And so like they hit that. They really found gold with Jalen Petrie playing as really a slot corner. They just extended him. And so you put all that together and they acquire CJ Gardner-Johnson. And so you put it all together and you look at the starting lineup and you go, that's a pretty good, 5-man unit there. They could use some depth for sure. They did bring in Ronald Darby. He's not, he's an older guy, not coming off his best season for sure, but they could use some depth there. I look at the defensive line and I think maybe the defensive line isn't great. Maybe they need, some depth at edge. Although I will say I might plant my flag here in Darrell Taylor, who they acquired in free agency. He's probably going to be their number 4 guy behind Derek Barnett. He has some really good markers if you go kind of through his career, including last year. He had a 14.2% pressure rate on limited snaps with the Bears. I wonder if he's maybe better than what we've seen. He does have 9.5 sack career. So there, I like these. I like doing this because I find these random guys that I'm like, yeah, you know what? That's going to be my guy. So anyway, Darrell Taylor is now my guy. But you look at their defense and it's not there. I think Rich, it's fine. Like everything is fine. They're going to add some guys. They're going to add some depth, but it's fine. Rich has just hit on it. The offensive line just has to be better. They have to probably find a wide receiver. We'll see what they're able to do with Christian Kirk as the number 2. Obviously, Tank Dell coming back from that serious injury. But it's just all the offensive line. And Rich brought it up. I think the interesting thing that they decided to do was that there were clearly issues in the offensive line room. As a short kind of tangent, I just happened to be in a steakhouse at a casino a month ago and was talking to like a guy that would know what's going on with the Texans. And he mentioned that everything that was happening with, Tunsil trade and everything, they were trying to improve that room and all of that makes sense. And they obviously decided to do it. But like, Tunsil was still good on the field, even with penalties. And now you don't have anybody like that. And your offensive line was already bad. And so it's just, they have to improve that. And if they don't, we saw Stroud take a bit of a step back last year. Can we get him back to his rookie level? I'm not sure. And so it just all really revolves around that. And they're going to have to fire as many bullets as they can in that offensive line room to really hit the level they expect to be.
Hey, Ray, I really did think, though, that King Moonracer was a character in Mario Kart. For some reason, it just felt like it was a Mario Kart reference to me.
You went immediately anime in your head. I figured that's where you were going. Which, to be fair, like I could see King Moonracer. That's a very. Why did they call him King Moonracer? I can't remember. Was he a race car? Rich, we need the deep Rudolph dive.
I actually don't know the origins of his
It
name.
just seems like a weird name for a misfit toy, but hey, we move on. There is no better way to
no,
prepare.
Warren moves
Yes.
on. I will be Wikipediaing that as you read this. So,
All right, I got something to share. Well, we'll get back to you guys on the King Moonracer in a second with a special breaking report from Ray. But there's no better way to prepare for the NFL season than with the in-depth coverage over at Sharp Football Analysis. We are working around the clock since the start of the offseason, pulling together player profiles on over 100 rookies looking to break into the NFL. You can see everything we've uncovered by purchasing our Sharp Football Analysis draft kit. You will get post-draft dynasty rookie rankings, seasonal rankings, player projections, player tiers, which are absolutely awesome. Such in-depth work from Rich on that every single year. I look forward to those. Team previews, dynasty football rankings, dynasty football tiers, draft approaches. He's got special videos for you and much, much more. The draft kit is updated throughout the offseason on a weekly basis. Make sure that you are always prepared for every single fantasy football contest that you enter. Go to sharp.football and click on our draft kit to get on board today. While you are there, don't forget to pre-order your copy of the 2025 NFL preview book. The over 500-page report gives you actionable analysis for every single team in the NFL. It's what we are going to endeavor to complete once the NFL draft is in the rearview mirror. This entire team, everybody on our call, gets focused on writing and drafting up that 2025 football preview. It is what leads into all of the futures that we end up sharing online. The information and the analysis that we pulled together in that book is not only unparalleled, you won't be able to find it at most other places, and you'll be ahead of the curve. So make sure that you are picking up the 2025 football preview as well. You can do that and find a link to that over at sharp.football, which when you're at sharp.football, make sure that you subscribe to the mailing list as well. Go to subscribe to the mailing list. It's completely free. We'll keep you updated on all the news that you need to be aware of and all the information and analysis throughout the course of the off season. Before we dive into the last team, do we have an update on the backstory of King Moonracer Ray?
It looks like King Moonracer is not even a toy. He is a mythical being. He is a winged lion, also known as a griffin. Not even a toy. Why is he running? Like
was he banished to rule the misfit toys just as a being from somewhere else?
Did he originally pull the sleigh? Like, I think we need a King Moonracer
backstory.
Is there a tie-in to like the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe in some capacity? I don't know.
Oh yeah, he's Aslan's brother. Is that where we are? We do have one football question in the chat from Howie. Does Houston still need a linebacker upgrade? That I feel like I should ask. I actually think they're probably fine at linebacker. I think Christian Harris is probably coming back. He can alleviate some of the coverage concerns they had. I think Al-Shaair is a good player. The hit against Trevor Lawrence aside, I think he's really good. They did have some problems in coverage with that top two, but they signed EJ Speed. Harris is back. Harris can contribute in that. They do have some long-term contractual questions, but overall, it's a lot like the rest of the defense. I think they're fine as a starting. Maybe we need more depth, but ultimately, I think they're okay with where they are at linebacker. If I'm going to talk about football for 1 second before I get back to reading about the history of King Moonracer.
Well, let's pivot to discuss another team that had success last year. They just lost to the aforementioned Houston Texans in that playoff game that we were discussing. This is another team that needs some work in the NFL draft to turn things around for them. Let's talk about the Chargers. The Chargers won 11 games and made the playoffs in Jim Harbaugh's first season as head coach. But in Justin Herbert's 5 seasons, the Chargers have yet to win a single playoff game. Justin Herbert is the only quarterback drafted in the top 10 since at least 2005 with an 0-2 record or worse his first 5 years in the NFL playoffs. The only one. Meanwhile, the AFC West is getting stronger and stronger around the Chargers. While they are still projected to finish second in the division, the Broncos with the young Bo Nix and the Raiders with Pete Carroll and Geno Smith are bringing respectability to round out the division. So, Ray, why do you think that the Chargers need to nail their draft picks here in the 2025 draft to turn things around for this franchise?
Because I mean, I think they're really close. Obviously, that loss against the Texans was disappointing, and what we saw, with Herbert, that was not great. But then you look at they they did really well from a draft pick perspective last year, and really hitting and making, kind of remaking the secondary a little bit, remaking their team a little bit. They still have needs on defense, but I think that they're really close. And if I'm looking at, okay, where do we need on defense? Where do we need to improve? The defensive line is not great. They lost 2 starters off that defensive line, most notably Poona Ford. That's a place they need to step up. You see a lot of mock drafts where they're taking Kenneth Grant in the first round. That Michigan connection with both Minter and Hribar, and I think that makes a lot of sense. They lose Bosa. Bosa's now playing with the Bills, so they need Thule to step up and really be that guy. But you look at that unit, and they have Bud Dupree and they have Khalil Mack. Both of them are on 1-year contracts, or in the last year of their contracts, but they have a good top 3 there, but they could still maybe use some depth. And then the secondary is very interesting to me, because last year they hit on day 3 guys with Cam Hart and with Tariq Still, and those 2 guys, along with Derwin James playing in the slot, and the quality they have at safety with Elijah Molden, who was signed to an extension, and with Gilman, like that top 5 is really good. They brought in some veteran defensive backs, Dante Jackson most notably, that can fill in the depth. And I look at this defense and I see it and I go, we never want to say a team is 1 or 2 players away. That's not really how it works in the NFL. But I look at it, and with the youth they have at linebacker too, with those 2 younger players, with Henley and Colson, then I see all of this and I say, if they just added maybe 2 quality defensive linemen, maybe a little bit of youthful depth on the edge, you're feeling really good about this defense. They have a couple things they need to add on offense, but I mean, their offensive line looks to be in great shape. So we're talking about like 1 or 2 players maybe on offense, and suddenly we're talking about like a real team. And then we just need the Chargers to not be the Chargers. So like, is it going to be the I fell for it award again with the Chargers this year? I'm not sure, but I go through this depth chart. They're very, very close to being one of those really good teams in the AFC.
Statistically, they were solid on defense last year. We did have some questions about the schedule, the strength of that schedule that they played, but they were solid for most part. You just mentioned a couple of positions they might want to look into. Rich, on the offensive side of the ball, what we know that Justin Herbert, in those 5 years, I was surprised to see that he was the only quarterback with that 0-2 record since at least 2005. That was a top 10 draft pick that couldn't get there and win more games, that has futility in the postseason to that degree. This team does need to get back on track so that people stop questioning, is Justin Herbert a good quarterback? Because he obviously is a good quarterback, but what do you think that this team needs to address on the offensive side of the football in this draft to improve enough to have some success in the postseason this year?
Yeah, they just need more explosive playmakers. The offensive line is in real good shape. The one bugaboo that they're going to run into is that they're going to have to give Rashawn Slater a really big contract. He's playing on the 5th-year option this year. He's due like Tristan Wirfs money. Zion Johnson, they can pick up the 5th-year option on him. He's kind of underperformed on his rookie contract, but they'll surely pick that up. They had Mekhi Becton in free agency. Like, this is a good offensive line, like you would expect the Greg Roman and Jim Harbaugh team to have, right? You add Will Dissly to that too. It's like an extra lineman. Maybe they add a pass catching tight end to the mix. Colston Loveland, obviously has that Michigan connection. You see him linked there. They also used a top visit on Mason Taylor if they don't want to use that aggressive pick, or if Loveland's just gone by the time that they pick, which is a real possibility. At wide receiver, they hit on Ladd McConkey, but outside wide receiver, Quentin Johnson's still a volatile player. You add Mike Williams. What does Mike Williams have left? Age 31, a year removed from ACL. Can he still get open? Can he be a downfield threat? Like, that are questions remain to be seen. And they just made a low leverage signing on Najee Harris at running back, who is, a Harbaugh Roman type of guy, but not an explosive runner, very low leverage contract. His best ability so far in the NFL has just been availability, or his best, he doesn't miss any games. So that's how he continues to accrue yardage. So they just need big playmakers. That's and like Ray said, like, you can probably get those guys around. Like, you can take someone with speed with a later pick, maybe not invest that type of significant capital, but they can kind of pick their poison here with what the picks that they have and see kind of what falls into their lap on offense a little bit. But they just need more speed and explosive playmakers.
And I think
Yeah,
the
they're
thing
deep.
that stands out to me about them, and like to kind of like bring this home, is we go through this in draft order. So we're starting with the worst teams theoretically, and we're going through the best teams. And that was also why the Bears stood out, is because the Bears are, you know, much further ahead in the draft order than the Chargers. And you look at the team and you go, this team shouldn't be drafting here, right? And that's true of like the 49ers, for instance, as well. So like there's a lot of that. But I got to the Chargers, and even where the Chargers are, and they were obviously a playoff team, I get to this team and I go, this team is better than where they're drafting, even though they're not drafting particularly that high. And I think the fact that when we're talking about what are we looking at in terms of team needs for them, like we're looking down the depth chart, still talking about these team needs. This is a really good team that needs just a few things and needs to not be the Chargers. And ultimately, that's such an interesting storyline to me, because we've had this story. What year are we on of this? Like, how many kids has Phil Rivers had since we started the storyline with this team? Like, at some point it's going to end, and they just continue to be such a fascinating team from that perspective to me.
Yeah, I definitely think that the Chargers are a team that needs to change that stigma and the way that they're perceived. And we thought with the new staff coming in that they would flush all the old thoughts down the drain, but then we still had that wild card game against the Houston Texans just to bring it all right back to the forefront. So they need a little bit of work here. And to Rich's point, you know, this is a team that on the defensive side of the football, they've been good at preventing explosive plays and forcing you to work your way down the field. But then on the offensive side, they kind of are building their offense the same way that their defense is. They're trying to just be efficient and consistent, but not explosive enough. And they need to figure out that way to get more explosive, to score points a little bit quicker, to flip the field a little bit faster, because it's just hard to sustain offense and convert third down after third down on long drives down the field. So they need a little bit of work in that regard. We touched on 6 different teams that really need to have some success, whether they have a lot of draft capital or a little bit of draft capital, to improve their trajectory and to get over the hump this upcoming season. There are some other teams that we didn't get a chance to touch on. I know it seems pretty obvious, but the New York Giants are probably on this list. It still is mind-boggling to me. I saw a tweet earlier today, guys, from Adam Schefter talking about how the Giants are scrambling around, going to see Shedeur Sanders today in Boulder, Colorado. Then Friday, they're going to see Jalen Milroe in Alabama. Then Saturday, they're going to see Tyler Shook in Louisville. And it's like, all of this could have been avoided if 8 days before the season ended last year, you didn't go out and win a meaningless game against the Indianapolis Colts. You would have had the number 1 pick locked up on December 29th, and you could have just rested guys and had the number 1 pick for the next 4 months, being able to promote it and talk about Cam Ward and give Brian Daboll somebody to work with. Now they're scrambling around. They're signing Jameis. They're signing Russ. They're going and attending all these different workouts, private workouts with some of these other quarterbacks that are not going to be drafted number 1 overall. We obviously have the Cleveland Browns. It's a team that needs to have some success in the NFL draft. I put a kind of a request out there on social, and a lot of the people who suggested these teams need to hit in the NFL draft mentioned a lot of teams that you guys were already discussing: the Cincinnati Bengals, the Miami Dolphins, but the Cleveland Browns, the New York Giants, a little bit of the Indianapolis Colts thrown in the mix as well. Pittsburgh Steelers, some people were talking about in addition. So there are some other teams out there that people felt needed to hit in this draft. Any other thoughts from you guys on any other teams that we didn't discuss real quickly before we close the chapter on this one?
No, I think it's funny that you brought it up, the Browns and the Steelers there, because they're both entering the draft with unserious quarterback rooms. Like, I would label them deeply unserious. The Browns are obviously in the spot because of the Deshaun Watson stuff, and they obviously have him on the book still. So, and he's injured and not going to play this year. So, like, you can give them maybe a slight saying like, this happened, it didn't work out. Now you have to dig yourself out. But if they're going to pass on quarterback at 2, there's really no solutions. You can take a flyer on a guy at the top of the 2nd round. But the Steelers have made their own bed here, man. Like, the Steelers have kicked the can since Ben Roethlisberger left. And you're now banking on a 41-year-old Aaron Rodgers to do what? Kick the can again? I mean, here we are.
Or Shedeur Sanders falling to you and it working out where it didn't with Kenny Pickett. Like, that's kind of where we are. I want to talk about 2 of the teams you mentioned. First of all, the Giants. like someone put in the chat earlier, and I'm with you. We're gonna have to. The Giants aren't actually that bad. They're another one of those teams that when I go through the rosters, especially on the defensive side, I go, this team isn't actually that bad. They're not bad enough to be picking certainly where they're picking, but obviously we know what the quarterback situation has been, continues to be, and it looks like will continue to be moving forward with Russ and Jameis Winston. Please just play Jameis. Like, let us have some fun.
New York football has experienced some great quarterback play.
Let's just have a good time. But yeah, someone mentioned the Colts, and the reason the Colts aren't on this list is because they don't, unless Anthony Richardson becomes something that he just wasn't in college and hasn't been for 2 years, it's not going to work out. And they don't think they need. Well, I've already given up on that one, right? As we're talking about the Giants, aren't we? And so with the Colts, they don't think they need a quarterback, but they still do. And so ultimately it doesn't really matter, right? Isn't that kind of where we are with them? Unless Anthony Richardson becomes something as a passer he hasn't been, or they just live with it because that offense wasn't terrible with him in there because of what he can do from a big play perspective and obviously do with his legs. It needs to stay healthy, but that's kind of where we are. Like, they're not on this list because they don't think they need a quarterback. And ultimately they're going into a season with 2 quarterbacks, neither of whom have been very good, neither of whom fit into a similar type of offense. So how are you even building an offense around these 2 guys who need the offense to be different? And ultimately that just means it's probably not going to work out. Again, unless Anthony Richardson just takes a big step forward as a passer in year 2. And if that happens, great. But that's the decider for them. It's not the draft. It's what happens here with Anthony Richardson.
And my big question with the Colts is if they truly did bring in Daniel Jones to compete in the preseason, in the offseason with Anthony Richardson, although I think Daniel Jones is not a good quarterback, he probably is going to look better in shorts than Anthony Richardson because so much of what Richardson brings to the table is those things that might happen when the play breaks down where he uses that athleticism. And that's not really going to be on display in practice on 7-7s and passing drills, things of that nature, where Daniel Jones improved accuracy over Anthony Richardson is going to shine a little bit more. So I'm really just curious to see week 1, week 2, what are we going to see? And do they just ride with Anthony Richardson just to close the chapter on him for good after he flames out after a few weeks and then pivot to Daniel Jones? I don't think they're going to win more games, but I just think Daniel Jones, if it's a true competition, if they're not lying about that, it's probably going to look better in shorts. Another team, guys, that was being brought up a little bit was the New Orleans Saints with Mickey Loomis, and what are they going to do with this whole Derek Carr situation and just how Mickey Loomis has been botching things for this team for years now. And so many of the Saints fans seem, as I've been posting on X and seeing the reactions, just so fed up with Mickey Loomis and what he's been doing in the box that he's been putting the New Orleans Saints in from a team building perspective and the salary cap, et cetera, et cetera. Talk about kicking the can down the road. I'm going to look forward to talking to Ryan McChrystal on our Tuesday show a little bit about what the Saints might do with their draft pick, given the fact that maybe they might need a quarterback this year with Derek Carr throwing a tantrum in the media and potentially not playing due to a fake injury that he is claiming that he has. But any quick thoughts on the Saints before we go?
Similar to the Steelers. I mean, this is what they've done. They've just kind of kicked the can at quarterback since Drew Brees left. I always refer to Mickey Loomis as George Bluth. He operates. There's always money in the banana stand. He just moves salary around, just continuously moves salary. Because every year you get to the season rollover and the Saints are like 20 million over the cap, and then he just like manipulates contracts, moves money around. They did it with Derek Carr, ironically, this offseason, and it might actually hurt them because now they moved his cap to next year, and he's 60 million dead cap next year. So even if he doesn't play football this year, then you've got to eat that next year. It's just pretty detrimental. They haven't been able to get any backup. And what's funny is their backup situation has been so disastrous and was so bad last year. Like it makes me laugh that Saints fans like hate Derek Carr to the degree they do. And I understand you're not going to win a Super Bowl at Derek Carr and you have that feeling, but like they didn't play any playable football without Derek Carr last year. Like they were 0-7 without him. They were dead last in the NFL in yards per play when he wasn't available. And like, then they were missing a bunch of other dudes, but this is what, and again, they made their bet, and Mickey Loomis has never traded back in the first round. This year is begging for the Saints to trade back. You need obviously a dance partner to want a player at 9, but there are going to be offensive tackles available at 9. I mean, the Saints need to actually scorch the earth once, and Mickey Loomis will probably end up trading up. Like if the Saints ended up with the second pick, it would be hilarious.
Yeah, and I mean, like And you even look at like the good players, like on defense, and they're getting older. They've started that transition out. We mentioned the Giants being better than maybe people think. Well, they ended up with Paulson Adebo, right? And so we're starting to see those transitions. But like they've got Justin Reed and Tyrann Mathieu at safety. That's a good group. But like why is that your safety group? Where are we going with this team? Like where are we going with Demario Davis? Where are we going with Cameron Jordan? As Rich said, they made the the cap gymnastics to be able to bring back Chase Young, which it's a good signing. Chase Young's a good player. They also did the same to like bring back Juwan Johnson at tight end. But like where are we going with any of this is really my question, and that's kind of where we are. They have a bunch of needs. They don't ever. It's an older roster. They never really have the cap space to deal with it in free agency. The offensive line, they haven't gotten that right to this point. Even when they hit on guys and we have like really talented players like, Chris Olave, what's happening behind those guys? We saw how bad that receiver group was with Olave and Shaheed out last year. And it's just like, I don't know where we're going. Like that's ultimately the question here. And if we don't want it to be Derek Carr, and if Derek Carr's trying to force his divorce and they end up taking a quarterback at 9, whether that's Shedeur Sanders or are they going to reach crazy for Jackson Dart? I don't know. Then where is that guy going to? Like, how are we getting to where we want to go ultimately, which is being a Super Bowl contender? And like you said, I don't know how we get there from where we are with the resources that are available for the Saints. And it probably means they just need to blow some stuff up, but that's just not what they're going to do. And so here we are. We're going to stay in this cycle.
Yeah, it's frustrating because that division seems like there's opportunity there, and there's been a little bit of opportunity for several years.
I don't know about that. The Bucs are good. Like we keep crapping on the Bucs because they play in this division, and maybe they didn't win it like strong last year. But I went through the Bucs are good. Like we just need to accept that the Bucs are good. They're not winning it by a fluke. They're fine. There's nothing wrong with them. Are they the best team in the league? No. Are they elite? No. The Bucs are good though. Like I need to give them some credit. Sorry, Bucs fans. I don't think your team gets enough credit. I think y'all are pretty good.
I'm not suggesting the Bucs are bad, but what I am saying is that if you look around the league at the number one team in a division, right, the best team in a division, if you try to stack the Bucs up to some of those teams, I don't think they really compete in that sense. And so the division is there, but yes, I do agree. The Bucs deserve to be the best team in this division. Howie mentioned the Saints drafting Dart with Cullen Moore, who's their new head coach, being Dart's offensive coordinator at Ole Miss. And will they trade down potentially, like Rich is sort of begging for them to do, collect some draft capital and go after Dart? But it does seem that old adage that if you think that Dart is the quote unquote franchise guy that you want to get, trading further away from the potential of getting that guy is probably less likely for most GMs to want to do, especially a guy like Mickey Loomis. So that seems less likely in my opinion, but it's going to be fascinating. I will talk to Ryan McChrystal about that on our Tuesday show. So again, schedule perspective, Tuesday, we're going to be going through draft props. Do not miss that show. We're going to be sharing a lot of those with you publicly here, noon Eastern time, live on YouTube on Tuesday. And then we're going to have our draft show on Thursday evening, picking up right around pick number 23 of the NFL draft, running through the tail end of the draft, along with the next 45 minutes or so after the draft ends. So join us at Sharp Football Analysis on YouTube. Make sure that you're subscribing to the channel so that you get alerts for all of these shows. Go ahead and give us a thumbs up. Head on over to sharp.football. Subscribe to the newsletter over there. It's absolutely 100% free. You will not regret that decision. While you're there, you might want to pick up a draft kit. You might want to get a fantasy football bundle, which is a better way to go, better strategy if you're looking to save a little bit of money. Futures package, all the types of information that you might be interested in is available over at sharp.football. So for Rich, for Ray, for myself, thank you for joining this episode of Team Needs, talking about the NFL draft and what teams need to hit on the draft. We'll be back on Tuesday to talk draft props. We'll see you then.